Hello and welcome back to another update. In this one I'll be covering the latest developments throughout the front line, starting out with this new counterattack by Russian forces in Robotyne, where they managed to recapture most of the territory they lost yesterday. They managed to recapture the positions with the trenches to the west of Robotyne, the ones beneath the forward positions. The forward positions are still in the gray zone, but this one right here has been managed to be recaptured by the Russian forces. This means that their hold on Robotyne, which was collapsing yesterday, is now stabilized again, as the Russians are now able to protect the western flank of the village, which then allows them to hold on to the center. As we can see, they've also managed to advance within the center. This allows them to then continue holding on to the village, especially since they also have the trench to the east of it. So their flanks are stable as of right now with this current counterattack that they started. Of course, the Ukrainians did not take this lying down, so we have these videos here which showcases Russian artillery fire on Ukrainian positions. The first one shows 2 artillery strikes in some fields to the north of Robotyne, and the second one showcases a Striker BMP, which is one they received from the United States. And then finally we have this night vision-ish video which showcases more further artillery strikes on Ukrainian forces to the north of Robotyne. So there's a lot of artillery by the Russian side on the Ukrainian positions by Robotyne, and as such we see them being able to successfully conduct this counterattack, where they've managed to push the Ukrainians slightly back within the village and to the west of it, recapturing the lost positions of yesterday and allowing them to continue this fight. And in addition to this, we actually have 2 videos and pictures showcasing yet another 2 Leopard losses, which brings my own personal collection of visually confirmed Leopard losses to be 31. This includes both destroyed, damaged and abandoned vehicles. The damaged and abandoned can be retrieved, but so far I am unable to verify any of that information, so I'm keeping the losses at 31. Visually confirmed so far. And then finally, this video here showcases a Ukrainian German-made BMP mortar being stuck in a trench. So in addition to the Leopard tank that was stuck in a trench, you also have this mortar stuck in a trench. So it seems the German vehicles don't like the trenches, as they keep getting stuck within it. Then we move on to the Urozhaine area, where here the Ukrainian forces continue the fight. Although we do not see any territorial changes in the area, we know that the Ukrainian forces continue their attempts at advancing within the zone of Urozhaine and Urozhaine down southwards towards Seremenivka. And we also move on to the Bahmut area, where here fighting continues. It is not clear if either side is making any advances, but there's heavy fighting, especially by Klishivka and Andreivka, as both sides are attempting to advance within those areas. The Ukrainians are trying to capture these areas, try to advance within the zone south of Bahmut, and the Russian forces are trying to recapture some of the lost territories to solidify their hold and control over these frontline villages, which is the front line for their forces in the south of Bahmut. And then we move on to the Serbiansky forest area, where here we see this video here which showcases a Russian drone locating a Ukrainian multi-launch rocket system and tracking it until the Russian artillery is able to destroy it. And we move on to the Luhansk Kharkiv area, where the Ukrainian forces continue their attempts at holding their positions as Russian forces continue their offensive operations. And in addition to this, we actually see the latest news showcasing the fact that Surovikin was relieved of the post of Commander of the Air Forces, left at the disposal of the Ministry of Defense, according to Alexei Venediktov, which is a reliable Russian journalist reporting on Russian internal affairs. So essentially what we're seeing is that Surovikin is quote-unquote relieved of his position as Commander-in-Chief of the Russian Air Force. This could mean one of 2 things. Either the Russian Ministry of Defense just removed him because they don't want him anymore, they weren't satisfied with his results, or whatever other reason that there could be, or that if we look back at when Surovikin was put in charge, it was exactly when the Russians started their defensive operations, when it turned completely from offensive to defensive. So we've seen the Russians being on the defensive since Surovikin was put in charge. And then now there's a lot of rumors going around about a potential offensive. I've made some analysis on a potential offensive. If that is true, then they would need a new general to command this offensive, because it seems that Surovikin's role was the defensive type. So he was a defensive general. His focus was on defense. So now they need someone who's focused on offense for their upcoming offensive. Meanwhile, we see Western articles like this one showcasing the significant success of the Ukrainian forces throughout this offensive. It is significant dent in the front line, the Ukrainian advances within Robotyne. As we've seen, this whole area marked with blue, it has taken the Ukrainians 2.5 months. So them entering the center of Robotyne is of course significant when you compare it to taking a couple of fields. They mention here the tactical importance of Robotyne being a hub for supplies going through a strategically important highway. Robotyne is currently the southern tip of an offensive thrust launched by the Ukrainian army in June as part of the summer offensive. The media further writes, a push that will try to get through the Russian defensive lines in this direction of the south of the town of Tokmak, a little over 30 kilometers to the south. The city is a logistical hub connected to the central highway that cuts through the Zaporizhzhia region down to the Sea of Azov. So if we take a look, we see the Robotyne area, the village itself is here. This is the highway they're talking about, going down through Robotyne, down to Tokmak, and then down to the Sea of Azov, both down to Melitopol and down to Berdyansk. So we see here that it is indeed true what they're saying, but it is not a straight line. They cannot just go straight down. They have to either go towards Melitopol or down to Berdyansk. And we have seen that the Ukrainian forces seem to be interested in going eastwards towards Verbove, which would indicate that they are going in the direction of Tokmak and then down south towards the east. That's their focus right now, as we have seen no success on the Ukrainian side to the west, but there is Ukrainian success to the northeast in the direction of Staromayorsk. If they connect that down south with the advances to the west, they will be able to go down towards Berdyansk. And this is actually more reasonable for the Ukrainians, because with the difficulty they've shown going and attempting to break through the first line of defense of the Russian forces, going towards Melitopol, which is significantly larger and more fortified than Berdyansk, would be a very difficult task. Berdyansk is the easier choice here, especially if they have success both in the east and the west, which would allow them to focus on this area to the east, allowing them to launch an attack from Holyapol as well, which will connect them from 3 different directions. So Tokmak is essentially the important logistical base, not Robotyne. Robotyne, breaking through it and capturing it, allowing them to push down south through the first line of defense of the Russian forces, will then allow them to go towards Tokmak. That is indeed true. However, there's also the village of Novopoprovivka, which of course is less defended as there's less fortifications to the north of it. However, it is with its close proximity to the Russian first line of defense, it makes it difficult to take over. And if they manage to take it over, then they will still have to break through the first line of Russian defenses. As for the eastern parts, we see by the Verbove area, the Ukrainians continue their attempts at advancing towards the first line of Russian defenses, but they've so far not launched any offensives in that direction, as they're still focusing heavily on Robotyne. And we have then seen the Russian forces counterattack and recapture parts in the center of the village, which then allows them to further hold on to it and defend it with the trenches to the west and the east of the village. And they also have the ones to the south of the village, so they still have about half of the trenches left within the village, as well as half of the village still in their hands. So the Ukrainians are indeed getting closer and closer to capturing the village, and they're heavily pressing on it, but this is just the first step. As the article mentions, this is the tip of the offensive, but they still have the whole iceberg going further south.